Jill here with Sirius Taurus Moon. This is Moon Hour, Jupiter Day Moon. Moon in Leo, Ascendant with Regulus, applying to conjoin Ketu. Mercury, applying to Aldebaran. Sun in Gemini, applying to conjoin Uranus. Well, this is where I want to address the fact that when we talk about honoring the feminine, we're talking about accessing the sense of self. Namely, this is about accessing who we are. Chiron at the end of Aries, conjoining Aries, Mars in Taurus, Venus transit from Cancer, remind us that defending the feminine, honoring the feminine, is accessing who we are. This is the transition of Mars from Aries, the I am, it's kind of like don't rape or no, so you won't be murdered, to honoring the feminine is accessing who I am. A different phrasing, different tonality, same concept. And how the ingress from the I am from Aries to that is essential, that is a part of me, that is a part of who I am. I need to defend that part of me, even when that part is, let's say, another person or another country or another origin. Now we have to be cautious not to overstep the sovereignty of kind of like the other representations of the feminine outside of oneself. Now, the more we access our sense of self, meaning the more we have basically the safety of not being raped and not being violated, then we also return to our sense of self, and then it's easier for us to honor the feminine. It's kind of like a self-perpetuating positive cycle rather than an undermining cycle. This is an important thing to remember when we come to the Mars square Pluto. Saturn is already in 11 degrees, Jupiter is already 22 degrees, Mercury is going to be 18 degrees, and then we're going to see the Mars squares Pluto on the 5 degree with a retrograde Pluto. And this is where we need to understand that honoring the feminine is accessing who we are, particularly when there were issues like ritual abuse. I think each and every one of us probably had at least one situation in our lives where there was something that we're questioning whether it's a part of who we are, or actually changing that is basically becoming more ourselves. Um, it can range from simple and mundane things, although with Mars squaring Pluto, it's probably going to be big issues. And Saturn, 11 degrees. reminds us that not defending the feminine. If I think about the femicide in Netherlands, there was 3 years of femicide women applied to euthanasia, basically over femicide, over attacking the feminine. Now, the people that were attacking the feminine, it ain't like they were not violating themselves as well. No. This is where even when we think about cultural appropriation, abolishing rape is way more important than a white person saying eight. Abolishing rape decolonizes and prevents colonialism. A white person saying ain't is somebody that was simply affected by being exposed to a culture, which means that they are inherently less racist. This sentence, completion of Mars squaring Pluto, will arrive Mercury in 18 degrees Gemini. So we're going to have the 11, the 22, and the 18 degree. Think about it. What is the results of not honoring the feminine? Suicide, genocide, and poison or pandemics. Honoring the feminine is not changing who we are, but actually accessing who we are. Okay, again, think about King Ramses. If the harem was a part of his self-definition, and the harem was trafficking, then he was ended because of the harem. He looted ideas from the women he trafficked, and then, boom. And he took all the Egyptian law with the occultistic with him. Why? Because the occultism was lootery. Not lootery that was, oh well, and somebody took some silver. That's not the point. Lootery, particularly not if the people could eat food because of that. Okay, but lootery in the sense that was violation, torture that creates terrorism. People have seen live how I reached the point of talking about total human extinction as a result of the torture that I went through. So, and this is that already reached the point of talking about total human extinction. Before I saw Pluto is about to close a cycle with Aries, it was in the aftermath where I was like, okay, what is happening in the world right now? I'm like, oh, Pluto is closing a cycle with Aries. It's going from the disagreement to the agreement. Well, the agreement can be total human extinction. It doesn't have to be, nothing has to happen, but for that nothing has to happen, it has to be at the approach exactly on an intimate level, honoring the feminine, honoring the yes, no, and maybe, and people having access to their sense of self. Okay? Oh, and that sentence, that paragraph that leads to Mars square Pluto is a part of a bigger chapter of Lilith transitioning from Sagittarius through Capricorn to be co-present with Ra and Pluto, and that's almost the last note before Ketu is with Pluto, and Pluto rules the nuclear part of A-bombs. Ketu is purging the nuclei of, alternatively purging the reason that there is A-bombs, namely on dishonoring the feminine or forms of rape or structures that would make people susceptible to being raped. Um, yep, that's it. I don't know. Happy holidays for those who celebrate the World Cheesecake Day or something, and or vegan cheesecake or whatever. Um, I don't know, whatever people celebrate. Um, so, by the way, Taurus also rules Kettle, and I believe with Chiron in Taurus, issues just like Uranus with Taurus created a lot of revolutions, and the spilling of the cow's blood as farmers' protest that was almost looking satirical, not just from a vegan perspective, but from a bloodletting rituals perspective, and even from a GMO perspective. It was like, yeah, blood on government buildings. Like, yeah, okay, um, but the government buildings consist of certain conglomerates that have other real estate than the parliament. Um, Now again, not dishonoring the farmers, but both in the farm and in the avocado fields, where no cows are violated, there is still rape of the employees. So our avocado is not necessarily more rape-free than our bolognese pasta with parmesan. Shout out to Italy for banning femicide. Um, what world news? So my previous episode, like I said, it was honoring Sedna, and every now and then I do tend now that Venus, where is Venus? She's in Cancer, right? Venus in Cancer, so it was a Friday, not a Friday, Venus hour. Jupiter days, Jupiter also in Cancer, and basically it's the honoring of the moon. Moon is a planet to oppose Pluto. Mercury and its home sign ruling over Sedna, it's sun ingress to Gemini, again conjuncting Sedna and Uranus. It was a good time to honor Sedna, so take it in the context that it was. Here's a Sedna reverence episode. And I haven't seen all the broadcasts of everyone. Kind of like the world is changing, and sometimes it's also allowing the world to world. I don't know. World news. In many ways, Brits admire the U.S., but are criticizing the U.S. as well. Europe warming twice as fast. Acute hunger in Lebanon. Human rights in Mongolia. Surge in sexual violence in Haiti. Now you're going to say, Sheila, you can talk about Sedna, hunger in Lebanon. Does it mean I'm not looking at Lebanon? I'm broadcasting from Israel. And there was rain this morning. I don't know if it's manufactured or not. Hardline Iranian general is a major player in talks with U.S. over war. Okay. Now, for the people like, are they gonna strike again in Congo and in Congo? Right next, slowly. Are they gonna strike again or in Iran or not? Here is the thing: there are several elections for that. The question is, what is the objective? You wanted me to lay down for you the elections. Well, Mercury Aldebaran, attack by honoring the feminine, my Sedna reverence video is very connected to a possible outline for somebody could be developed into a strategy for that. Mars squaring Pluto, I would not necessarily start anything there, but it can be a response type of thing. Response by who? Response by Iran? Response by the West? I don't know. Why would I not start such a thing? Because even if I start a war, I don't want the 11 and the 18 to be there. For the 22, it's about defending from dishonoring of the feminine. And to the best way that we can do that, the best we can have a win that's not a Pyrrhus win. It can also be a win-win. Okay, with Aldebaran, that can be a win over, but it can be a win over that is the only win that is over and is not a Pyrrhus win is a win over the dishonoring of the feminine. And it's an internal victory before it's an external one. For example, not to blame ourselves for being raped is already like, oh, that's a boundary. Now that rage is already something to work with. But rage alone is not suffice. Setting the boundaries, making place for love. World news in brief. Conflict drives hunger in Congo. UK government to release papers to former Prince Andrew's appointment. Um, Sports news. Again, I'm not a sports astrologer, so I don't find much to delineate there. There's regarding, let's say, mundane astrology. U.S. News and World Report announces launch of the Best Leaders podcast. So you have media broadcasts, again, Sun Gemini, Uranus Sedna, Mercury approaching Aldebaran. Good day to launch certain media projects, but again, for them to be not a Pyrrhus win, they need to antidote the Epsteiners. Not an easy task, but I've outlined the major pillars of the foundations for that, or the cornerstone for that. CBS News radio anchors reflects on their legacy before final sign-off. Like I said, people don't always work a job, but they actually tend to a topic, they solve a problem creatively, then these are the major issues. And when we take a look at entrepreneurship, and we take a look at actually tending to issues, not by creating the problem, but by actually solving an existing issue. Okay, I did not create dishonoring of the feminine. I saw that aligning with sexual sovereignty, and I had to define what is sexual sovereignty. I looked for sexual sovereignty related real estate, and I saw advertisements for literally indigenous brothels. Which is trafficking houses. Okay, something that aligns with going from those misplaced arousals that are basically what the body generates to alleviate trauma, to relaxed arousals that would generate an actual orgasmic birthing. Oh, orgasmic birthing. Oh, that's why it sounds like a woman giving birth. Yeah. Okay. That is also connecting with wealth, with our own ideas and our own patterns. And this is also a pathway. Oh, wait a second, the Epsteiners was a breeding farm. And they tried to use AI to imitate. And then they plagiarized ideas and got people out of their jobs, or out of their houses, out of their incomes, and even out of their bodies. Not in a pleasant experience. Yeah, that probably has to do with the tech egregore that they were operating with. Okay, so egregores also have to support orgasmic birthing process. Wait a second, when I reframed the 8th house in astrology from intergenerational trauma to orgasmic birthing lineage, I'm like, that's where intergenerational wealth is. It's not the flashy cars, and it's not the abstinence from, it's not a Puritan luxury zero branding bag, or what they call old money or luxury or quiet luxury. Again, it's a style, but it's a lovely style, but it's something that's deeper than that. So it permeates the image. And it also makes an access for every lineage to curate and have intergenerational wealth, namely people not having to worry about their children being poor. Okay? Now, I can't sum that into 9-to-5 job. And I can't say that I didn't go through tremendous amounts of crises. I mean, these type of topics, any person that says has a scientific discovery or whatnot, but connecting all these dots, each and every dot is not my idea, but connecting them to a process. And this is a different type of contribution. Okay, we write in Genesis. When we think about big ideas, Saturn in Aries can take a lot of people through the entrepreneurship. Whether they have Aries 10th house, Aries, even 6th house, 12th house, 2nd house. I have Aries 2nd house. According to some delineation, 1st house, so it will literally be my path. And it's a direct for me with other people that are attending to these topics from their point of view. It's a different type of emerging naturally and organically thought forms, or what people call egregore, but these egregores don't ask for human sacrifice. And this is the access to the authentic real estate. Okay, I have seen the trajectory of what people call good neighborhoods turning into crime neighborhoods and vice versa. Had to do with to what level was human trafficking abolished, because Aspen is not a safer neighborhood than, let's say, Harlem. Regardless of your gender, regardless of your origin, regardless if you're black or white. And when we get that, we get something around real estate that nobody bothers to tell. Côte d'Azur is not a lovely place to live in if we have to worry about children being kidnapped too, or sacrificed or whatnot. Um, Now, all of these big sentences, paragraphs, chapters, and mini books form an encyclopedia, Pluto Aquarius, the encyclopedias of Pluto going from the square to the sextile with Aries as Aries ingresses into Taurus. The semi-sextile between Sedna and Aries. Technological wombs that dictate the genes of the infant and so on and so forth. Okay? Lovely for people that can't have children and have access to birthing. By the way, they say only the rich will be able to access it. No, I saw families in Israel that had IVF subsidized. So the issues were actually not the accessibility and affordability, in as much as they say it's, oh, we have 2 fetuses that came out and one is frozen, and then a year later one is different. We had twins that were born in delay. By the way, Saturn Gemini is probably going to give us a lot of the defreezing of, there's one twin and then the other twin is born in delay. And it can, in the good context, it can actually be a Saturn in Gemini remediation. Okay? But what about if there are another 17 unregistered ones? Why do they do that? They are afraid of the Inquisition. Are they taking the right steps to abolish the Inquisition? No, no, no. The Jewish taking over the maritime borders was basically the pirates taking over those who called them pirates and called them pirates back. Now again, I think Uranus probably would have been, if Mayer Amschel Rothschild had a Uranus, I think it was Capricorn, then kind of 80 years, but probably give us a Uranus around the galactic center. Prime Minister of Singapore has Uranus on the galactic center. And indeed, Singapore has turned into the billionaire hotspot. So much so that we're thought to even transition the International Court of Justice to Singapore. Okay, they basically they hacked the economic hitmanship of the United States in the West. Now, again, is it going to have implications when it comes to minors-related questions, which are not minor questions? But when we make of them minor questions, then, that can bring, it can mean that Singaporeans might be the new Jews. Minor questions are not minor questions. Literally, lady crossed over with the child when I was speaking. Now, what does it mean for the Pluto to sextile Aries? You'll say, no. Total human extinction. We got people already practicing the practices of the Mayans and the Aztecs before they got extinct. Before. I'm like, oh, Pluto's about to close the cycle with Aries again. How do we transcend the chart? Well, the context of dishonoring the feminine was relevant in all of those human extinctions, whether it's the Phoenicians and basically that their Achilles heel was having a harem, or the Christians that their Achilles heel was, I don't know, the Achilles heel of basically the way they treated Mary Magdalene. Now here's the thing, if the Vatican would save the women from the harem and honor women's rights, for everyone, regardless of class or caste or whatnot, there wouldn't even be Islam. That nobody would need another prophet that decided the woman has her own territory and her own land, and we can marry also this, also that, so that the disabled, the widow, and I don't know what, the older woman will not be kind of like the marginalized from society from that perspective. But it was kind of like a mini harem, because eventually it turned out to raping to people even before puberty, calling it marriage, and then divorcing. Um, Now, is having a bunch of manufactured children the answer to the fear of the Inquisition? No. And I kind of think they know that. But those that know that within certain class believes that the common people don't know. The common people that know that believe that those up there don't know that. And, and um, so what can we do? Well, I don't know, promote in whichever way something aligns more with changes as orgasmic birthing that is actually pleasurable and actually willingly consensual, and the infrastructure to that, because that's the infrastructure to curate from trauma. It's the same thing. People have to scream, shout, I don't know, kick something that's not a person or an animal or a living being. Have a place that is safe enough for them to have the outlet of that energy without them fearing that if they scream for help, nobody comes. Or if they stay silent, it's understood as compliance. There's something that they never comply because they can't speak or something like that. Everybody, the issues that we have, thinking about this above, so below, the issues that we have below, to create the spaces above that are compatible for life transitions as orgasmic birthing, which is also curating trauma, that is honoring the sense of self and re-accessing the sense of self, whether somebody is able to work or not. And again, I'm not talking about orgasmic birthing of children. I'm talking about taking from this model to life transitions. That is creating, that is something that forms sort of like when you think about if there's a person missing. So creating the space that they could return to safely is a good action to take to bring them back. If we have people missing, but the public transportation is not compatible for claustrophobic and agoraphobic people, or the housing structure, the city planning. So it basically, now we're gonna see that a lot when people tend to the missing. They see that a lot. There are many times I saw a situation that a person needed to have the environment compatible to claustrophobia and agoraphobia when I tended to the missing or to the kidnapped. Paramount. If we don't even think to tend to that, then it's kind of like laying dormant, and we're looking for the person. We don't have an actual way to bring them back without them wanting, let's say, even euthanasia. If we tend to both, then we are way closer to tending to what is below, to what is unseen. And then if the world, let's say if a person comes back and they find themselves screaming, shouting, and so on and so forth, and immediately they tag this crazy, whether if like, oh, people are used to having, wait a second, we know that from orgasmic birthing, they're in a life transition. Yeah, they came back from, I don't know, whether it's being kidnapped, whether going missing or whatnot. They are basically transitioning into, we need to support them so that they are safe to feel and express and let the what got stuck in the body or got stuck in the psyche be released in a way that is adaptive, is not by perpetuating another trauma. And the environment is designed to have the nervous system happy and safe consistently, and the economy and the structure and so on and so forth. Now we actually have viable. Now, when we take that steps in matter, for the people that are here that are visible, and for every visible person, also 4% is not yet there. That means that our kingdom does what those that traded women don't. Okay? And when we check the scriptures, particularly if we expect someone to read them and to act by them, because they are the basis for jurisdiction, for legislation. Okay, here in Israel, the law is still affected by the Mishnah, the Talmud, but also the Ottoman law and the British law. Now, if all of them have a story of creation that is rape-based, we understand how susceptible the entire region is to many things. But then when we see, you talked about Senna, when we see Inuit women being murdered 10 times more than other women in the same country, there's something off. And we can, even if we say, oh, that's the Inuit culture, let's say it was, because probably it couldn't have happened without the cooperation of certain people from within. But instead of looking for who those certain people are and so on and so forth, creating the spaces that are actually allowing to recover. Now, for the other countries, it's kind of like, well, we can't blame Inuit culture if we don't provide asylum for these women. If we've provided asylum for these women and children and so on and so forth, and ban femicide, it means we have to prepare, let's say we're in Netherlands. So we have to prepare the soil, we prepare the structure, prepare the politics for banning femicide. We do it within, then we can accept what the women outside, they're not draining on the economy. Nor are they a cultural threat. And then the Inuit countries will need to make sure that it's safe for these women if they wish to return, if it's not too traumatic for them. They got to see that the women are walking out of violence. But what if there is femicide in Netherlands for 3 years? It's not a hypothetical situation. It is an existing situation that directly affects NATO, because Senna is in the 10th house of NATO as Mercury is in the 8th. That was my previous episode of Senna Federation. If we go by femicide, we're creating an inquisition. If we create an inquisition, everybody is the woman. If we hate, if, let's say, if the West convert Christian whatnot complex hates women more than it hates being tortured and persecuted by Islam, then the trajectory is the trajectory. And here we have something that is, yes, somewhat different. Um, and that would be the Pluto cycle. Let's take a look at Pluto. Wait, Pluto. Pluto cycles. Let's see if we have. We have future cycles, past cycles. Yeah, that's actually a comprehensive thing. Let's look at past Pluto cycles. More than that, gonna need it. Okay, I'm gonna relook at that in the thousands because. Okay, let's take it from Volk 1600 Pluto 1602 Pluto. Okay. Aries. Pluto was in Aries. So that would have been the conjunction, the co-presence of Pluto and Aries in Aries. Okay. Now, it's gonna be there again at around something like the 2080s. But Aries is already gonna be in Taurus, either in Taurus or already in Gemini. Um, so the opening cycle of Pluto Aries was basically Dutch East India. Now Pluto is coming to close a cycle and basically going from the square to the sextile. It means that there is a completion. And Pluto is, 148 years, 248 year cycle. So let's see, times Pluto was in Aries. But Aries is around 550, 526 years, which is pretty much, we're pretty much around the Aries return for Volk. 1800, that was the end of the Inquisition. So we had the beginning of the Inquisition all the way to an Aries cycle now. It means that we have, if we talk about conjunction and opening of Aries cycle, first of all, it will be open in Taurus. And this is where I say honoring the feminine. Okay, it's not the same incarnation. It's not the same exact spirit of the times. It's never it's a variation on the canon, but all that canon in itself is transforming. The planets revolve around the sun, but the sun also revolves around itself and it has a telos. Pay very close attention to every single planet that passes through Taurus before Aries does. When Aries does that, it does that almost with Neptune. That means we're going to have a 5.25 centuries planet together with 150 years or the century and a half planet, both ingressing to Taurus. And we are getting every single preparation we can get for that cycle. Uranus in Taurus. Now Chiron. Okay, Chiron going to go through Taurus. Because by the time Chiron is done with Taurus, except for eclipses, it's us waiting for Aries and Neptune to dance that dance together and ingress into the time where, when Aries ingressed, it was somewhat around Uranus when Aries ingressed into Aries. It was around the Great Depression. This is those, how should I say it? That was the century that we had both almost 100 years without war, but also perpetual war at the same time. We had a financial crisis that shaped the century. Those that persecuted women were perpetually persecuted, and women got more rights and more rights when more rights, because the sense of self in itself requires to abolish rape. To the extent that we did that, we're good to go with Aries in Aries. To the extent that we didn't do that, Aries in Venus sign is going to be challenging, to say the least. I think just this Mars squaring Pluto, just this small segment, the small sentence, or the small paragraph, is already giving us the clue about the ingress of Aries to Taurus. Because in the century of Aries in Aries, we asked questions about the human nature and we got answers. The human nature, fantastic, unless you torture them. And we got the important thing that discussing that is not inviting that, or discussing torture is not inviting torture into being. Again, honoring the feminine. Occultism that doesn't honor and know is not occultism, it's a scam. And the results of that scam we all see. If we think that, I don't know, a woman walking outside in a nice dress is inviting something terrible, then the society that perpetuates these thoughts and actions is inviting inquisition. Um, to the extent that it goes without saying, is basically kind of like the world being prepared to curate rather than to wound. More things to do with that. Um, yeah, midheaven was crossing Aldebaran, already Saturn hour